Hello, my name's John Pratchett, and in this video I'm going to show you how I set up my X32 rack to work with Vmix. So first off, if you find these videos useful, please subscribe to the channel and click the little bell icon as well so you know whenever I release new content. And as I said, in this video we're going to look about how I configure my X32 rack. It could be an X32 core, could be a full X32, could be an M32, could be an M32 core. They're all effectively the same when it comes to how we're going to configure it here. You may have known from my other videos that I have a Dante network and I set up most of my projects using two Vmix machines. So just to clarify how I am working, I have two Vmix machines. You'll see the Vmix machine on the right. There we go, further on the right. I have that set up just as a call machine. It does nothing other than bring in calls, whether it's Vmix or I sometimes run Skype on there, or I might run Teams on there. But in this case, we're going to show it with Vmix running, and I would just put all my 8 calls through that. And then the machine above there, which would be my main cut machine, let's just bring that up. You can see what we sort of have. I would have my 8 calls coming into this via NDI so that I have pictures. Now, what I also do at this point is on this machine here, I send all my calls out via my buses. Now, I've done a video on this, on how I use that and how I do that before, so make sure you check that out. Link will be in the description. But all my calls 1 to 8 are coming out of buses A to D from this machine here, not from this machine here. There's a reason I do that, and the main reason is, in this particular instance, that frees up all these buses here for returns. If I wanted to send individual returns back to my Vmix callers, I can do so. I could just add in, if we have a look here, actually you're seeing them there, here are all my buses, and I can send them all to A, B, C, D, E, F, G and master, and then have all my calls listening to A, B, C, D, E, F, G and master. If I wanted to, then that gives me complete flexibility of what each of those 8 callers hear. I don't have to do that often, but if I do, it's ready to go if I need to. So just to recap, all my Vmix callers are coming into this machine here. All their audio is being sent out through the buses into my Dante network, which means, of course, they're now available on my X32. So let's go and have a look at that. Here we go. So this is X32 Edit. There's also a version called M32 Edit, and which is what I'm running, M32 Edit. Both exactly the same application, just looks slightly different as far as icons and things go. They just made the M32 one, I think, slightly prettier, but functionality, way they work, exactly the same. And this, in this instance, is connected to an X32 core. If you don't know, there's various revisions and types of X32s. X32 core is basically a 1U rack-mounted version of the X32. It has no I/O on it at all, apart from you have to plug in a card, or you can use the AES50 ports and then put in a stage box, for example. So I have the Dante card in this, which basically means that all my inputs and outputs are through Dante. But as far as the processing concerned, it's exactly the same as you'd find on an M32, an X32, an X32 rack, an M32 core. It's all exactly the same. So all this will work on the whole M and X range. The software is exactly the same. So let me show you what I do. Here is my main inputs, and I would put in my callers that I'm sending out from my buses. You can see they're coming from a card input. They will come into inputs 1 to 8, just here. And as you can see, I've just labeled them call 1 to 8. And you can see the number goes up here. This is the card that they're coming in to. So I have all my callers coming in there from my buses. Again, they're passed straight through the main Vmix machine, out of the buses A to D, and then they come in here. I then have some other inputs here. I have, this one's Quartz, which is because I have a Quartz Canyon NUC. And so that is a Dante Avio adapter. I have an Asus laptop that is also a Dante Avio adapter. I have another NUC, which I run for Google Meet. That's also a Dante adapter. And I have another NUC. Guess what's on that? another Dante adapter. I then also have a VT input. These are stereo inputs. I have a VT input, and that comes out of my main Vmix machine again. I just send that out of bus E. I then have an iPad here, which is also being converted to Dante, so that comes in here. So if I want to run anything from Dante. And then I have my main TX mix, which is coming out of a Shogun. So remember that what I do here is I do not encode anything within my Vmix machines. I use external encoders, which is why it makes life much easier for me to take everything out of Vmix, run it on a mixer, and then send that and re-embed that back into the SDI channel just before it hits the encoder. And so what I then do is I take a feed out of my Shogun, an Atomos Shogun monitor, which has got the same SDI feed in that's going to my encoders. I run that back into the mixer, and I'll show you why I do that in a minute. Then I also have in this system here a Unity server. Let me just show you what that is. The Unity server is this here. So this, you may have heard of Unity Intercom. This is what this is. A lot of you may use Unity Cloud. This is the hosted server version that you can get here. And this version has far more functionality than if you were just using it on the cloud. So this is hosted on a Mac, and what you can see here is I can have various channels. I have 6 channels, and then I'm not going to go too much into this, but basically the audio feeds can come in and out of these groups and channels to input numbers here, these relevant to Dante channels, and they come into my mixer. So let me just do a side-by-side for you. Here we go. If I was to go and send a bit of tone out of, I've got a test tone button here, you'll see, there we go, that comes in on that one. If I put it all on the others, there you go. You can see that we have the audio coming in. You see as it test tone switches off on those individual channels, the audio levels drop as well. So I basically have my Unity Intercom system routed through to Dante as well. Therefore, they come into the mixer on these. So anybody who speaks on my Unity Intercom channel 1, I will come in on this channel. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they come on these channels here. These 3 at the end here are my talkback buttons. I, again, have a Glen Sound Dante talkback unit, which is what you're hearing me through at the moment. Hence, you can see this level going up here. And I have 3 buttons on this. So, for example, you're hearing me on my main mic, open mic button here, but I also have a TB button 1. If I press that, you'll see the level going up there, and that's me coming in on TB1, and that's me coming on TB2. So I've got 3 channels of talkback that I can then route anywhere I want. And those are the main channels that I have coming into my X32. This is all laid out. I've got a custom layout here. As you notice, I called it inputs, and hence the reason you are not seeing stereo pairs coming up here, because I don't need to see stereo pairs. If I was to move that up and down, it's actually moving that pair up and down like that. So it saves me having to waste real estate by having 2 channels when I only need 1 to be able to move it up and down. So this is where everything's coming in. The beauty of it is, of course, I've now got some control over the shaping of the sound here. So my callers, I can obviously put some EQ on them, and I can EQ them as I see fit. Let's have a look at mine. This is me talking. I've got nothing on here. So I can go through all my callers. I can do some EQ. I can do some dynamics. I have pretty much standard dynamic processing going on here. You can just see it's taking just a little bit of volume off the top of my voice as I get louder. If I could speak properly, it would help. I also have things like, obviously, gates, which I'm not using. And again, what we also have are some plugins and effects and things like that as well. So let me go into what I do about that. The X32 range, as a general rule, has 12 mono buses and 4 buses set up as stereo buses for effects to run through. Now, in an environment that we're working, we don't really need to run reverbs and things like that. We don't need to run, we're not running to a front of house in stereo or anything like that. We don't need what's known as bus effects so much. We just want effects that we can insert on a channel as a general rule. So that means I can free up all those buses for other uses. So that's what I've done here. You'll notice that I have all these buses up here. Every single one of these is a separate feed out and is routed to a Dante channel out, which I can bring into anything. So I would have, for example, here, these buses set up as comms 1, comms 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I can choose what each of those buses receive. So, for example, here, comms 1 is receiving me, and we know that comms 1 is routed down to my comms channel 1 on my Unity server. So I can choose, right, people listening on comms 1 want to hear me. Do they want to hear caller 1, 2? Do they want to hear somebody coming in on that? Do they want to hear some VT? I can just do a mix. These are what's known as pre-fade mixes. That means effectively, if I was to turn up and down these channels here on my main left and right, which is what goes to my recording, which is what the mix that you're hearing at the moment, if I turn that down, it doesn't affect what happens on my bus feeds. All of them are set to pre-fade, so they're effectively 16 individual mixes of whatever we want. So again, I use buses 1 to 6. They all go out to my Unity Comm server so that I can send whatever I want. People can hear whatever they want down those channels. And you'll notice I have another bus here called Program TX. And this is why I bring the Shogun in. The Shogun is here. So again, remember that is my TX send that I'm going out to my encoder. That is my final mix. I bring that in here, and you notice that is the only one that's turned going up to Program TX. And that's because Unity Intercom server allows us to also, on top of the 6 channels, have a program return as well. In fact, if you pay more for different licenses, you can have more than one program return. But it does mean that if people wanted to hear the program through their comm system, they can just turn that up and down as a separate channel. And this is what they get. So I know that they are getting the final program mix. So that just goes down that channel. And then I have other buses. Well, you know, I've got this Quartz Canyon, this Asus laptop, this NUC, and this other NUC. Well, they're all received, so I want to be able to send things back. So I have buses for them. So this is my Asus laptop. So my Asus laptop might be running Teams, for example. And if you're on the Asus laptop, it might be that those on Teams want to hear all my Vmix callers. So I can turn that up like that. They might want to hear people coming in from, let's say, a Google Meet call. So they can hear that as well. They might want to hear a bit of VT. And they might want to hear whoever's talking on channel 3 on comms. So I can do a mix like that. Same for my NUC. And then I've got another one down here, which is the same to my Quartz Canyon. So they're the sort of things you can do with the buses. The main thing is you can just send whatever mix you want and the levels of each individual channel to that mix. It's just really, really flexible. You'll notice some others that I've got here. I've got like TB1, TB2, and John Q. Again, these are sent to my talkback unit that I've got here. So I have 3 channels with 3 volume controls, and I can choose what I want to listen to. So for example, on my Q, I want to hear my producer, which always comes in on comms 1. And most of the time, to be honest, that's it. I don't need to hear VT. And on this button here, if, for example, I am talking to hosts on that particular channel, my talkback 1, I would like the associated button to be my host. So that might be just the person who's on caller 1, and I can hear that. And then if my producer is also talking to the host, and she's talking on comms 2, for example, I want to hear a bit of that as well. And likewise, TB2, you know, that might be listening to Teams, for example, on my Asus laptop. I can hear that, and I could hear other people who are talking on other channels. So hopefully that makes sense. You can see that with setting up these buses, I can basically send anything I want to any output, and then route that output in. So if you were, for example, let's take these comms mixes. Let's assume you haven't got a Unity comms server. These could quite easily be mixes that you would send back to your Vmix call system. So, for example, I've got, let's say I had 6 callers on and I wanted each of them to have their own mix, then I could just send, these could be mixes for, that could be the mix for caller 1, the mix for caller 2, the mix for caller 3, the mix for caller 4. So for example, caller 1, in that instance, let's say this is the caller 1. Caller 1 would want to hear, let's just put a 0 in there, and then tab that, and then they want to hear that, and then they want to hear this, and they want to hear this, and they want, so yeah, so you effectively end up doing the mix minus yourself. So they're hearing everything other than themselves. Caller 2, of course, would want to hear caller 1, but not hear caller 2. So they want to hear that, 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 they want to hear this, and they want to hear that, for example. So you can set up multiple mix minuses, and then they'd want to hear, let's say, a Teams call, and they want to hear the producer on that channel, they might want to hear me, and they might want to hear a bit of ET. So you can do a complete separate mix for individuals. So if caller 2 says, oh, caller 4 is a bit loud for me, can you turn it down? Yes, I'll turn caller 4 down for you. And then, of course, they are just brought back in. Again, let's just go back into this shot here so you can see what's going on. They would just come into, I'll just add these channels into here on Vmix and then route them to the appropriate bus. So I'd route caller 2 to bus B, and then I'd make sure that caller 2 is listening to bus B. And that's the beauty of having all those buses available to you. So that's the general way that I set up my X32. Some other things that I do, I run, because I've still got effects slots on here, I can't run them as buses, I don't want to, but what I do is I put in a, this is called a stereo combinator. It's effectively what's known as a multi-band compressor, and I stick that on my left-right bus, so it goes through this, and as you can see, it looks at different bands of EQ, and if a certain band goes over a certain threshold, it will just turn those down for you, and it tries to even off the voice a bit. I have a very middly sounding voice, and you can see that going up and down here, and it's taking a bit of the middle out of my voice, and that's fully adjustable. So I run everything through that. Subtle, you never want to overdo these. And then right at the end of my chain, I will run a precision limiter. Now I haven't put it in here, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on an X32's routing, but basically what you can do is you have your main left and right channel, and then you can route that through to what's known as a matrix, which is just another set of outputs, and on that matrix out, you would then put in your limiter, and you can set a hard limiter so that you never go on, you're never going to start peaking, you're never going to start getting distortion and things like that, and it just manages everything, and if something's pretty quiet, it'll keep it up there for you. So you can do that. All you have to do is you send your main left and right, which is here. Let me do that. I click on sends, and you can see I'm going to this main left and right here. There it is. And then if I look on that channel, you only ever have to do this once really. Once that's done, if I look at my matrix, you can see here, left and right, you can see that's coming in. And if I wanted to, I could insert on here my limiter. Hopefully that hasn't screwed up my sound. Right, so now there's a limiter on here, and if we look back in here, you can see it's now inserted in there. Now it's probably not doing much. Let's move that across for you. There we go. Actually, it's doing nothing at the moment because I haven't turned it down, but if I wanted to, I could start doing all sorts of things with it. So that's my general output settings that I would use on an X32. But I've got loads more slots now, so let's use them. And what I find to be very useful is the De-Esser, especially when we're working with people that are coming in from Vmix calls and Zoom and Skype and Teams. You'll notice that the compression that it uses on the voice makes you sound very essy. It's called sibilance. And what this can do is it can deal with that for you. So this dual De-Esser allows me to insert it on 2 channels. So once it's inserted, let me pull that across. There we go. I have, this will be channel 1, this will be channel 2. I can adjust my de-essing on there so that when it senses the it'll pull that down for you. And you can see that's inserted on channel 1 and 2. This one's currently not inserted. That one's on 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12. So that takes me all the way up to here. Basically all my callers coming in, I can put some de-essing on there. It just makes things sound a little bit nicer. So it's quite a good use of those extra slots and is a simple effect to manage. Don't overdo it too much, otherwise it sounds like the person's got a lisp because all the F's go. So we don't want to do that. So have a look at that. They're good to play with, and they do just keep that whole sorting out. Obviously, you can do certain things with EQ as well. You can look at your sibilant side of things. If I go, you can see where it is, and you could pull that down a bit there. This EQ is not activated, so you're not hearing the effect. Or you can boost things. Do play around with the EQ. Look up some tutorials on EQ. So that's the general setup that I would have for a typical X32 Vmix, dual Vmix setup. So what I'm doing is my main left and right, which is obviously my main mix that's going out to air, that is then being routed out to Dante, and then I embed that in various places if I wanted to, but most of the time I embed it in something like an A10 HD, Studio HD, so I would convert my Dante to 2 XLRs with a little converter, and that goes into the XLR into the A10 Studio HD, where my SDI is going into. I then embed it, and off we go to the encoders. Now, obviously, when we are working with 2 different routes, video and audio, we're going to have to do some delaying and syncing in order to make sure everything gets itself in the right place and at the right time. So when it hits the encoder, the audio is in video with the sync. It's audio and video in sync. So this is another place where I can do that. A couple of things that the X32 system has, which is really nice, is if I wanted to, if I go to config, I can put delays on individual channels in milliseconds. So I can time sync individual channels if I want to. Most of the time, all the channels are pretty much coming in sync with each other, so that's not too much of a problem. We're in sync with our own pitches because we're NDIing straight into our Vmix and then straight out, so they come into there and then they go out, so they should be reasonably in sync, and they are. So I don't really have to use that. And the other drawback of putting your delays in here is that if you are sending these back and you're doing mix minuses, you are actually adding some delay to the return that's going back to your caller. So you're adding a little bit more on the round trip of the audio. So what works majority of the time, because I put everything through the same route, everything comes out of Vmix 1 into my main cut Vmix machine, and that's the machine that sends it into Dante, including the VT play out. So everything comes the same route. They come into the X32 effectively at the same time. I only need to do one delay, and I can do that on what's known as the output. So we can do what's known as output delays as well. So if I go to this routing tab here, I've got a little thing called output delay, and I've routed my matrix. If you remember, that's the last thing that happens after the limiter's been put on, my matrix, and I've enabled a delay on there. And for me, to get my audio and video effectively in sync with my, at the end of the chain where it hits my encoders and recorders and things, I need to put 108 milliseconds of delay at that point. Audio is going to get there quicker in this instance. It always does. So especially Vmix has quite a high latency coming out of it, and that will obviously delay that video. So you do need to delay the audio to at the point they meet again, which is at the Studio HD. If you're using something else to embed it, sometimes the thing that you're using to embed it, if you're using an A10 Studio, for example, an A10 Mini to embed, and you're using the little mini jack in, you've actually got a delay option on there where you could delay that audio if you wanted to. While I'm in this, quickly before we start closing on this, I'll just show you how I route things. Here's my card input, and so when I click this, this is saying, so look, shows you I've got a Dante card in here, and this is saying all my card outputs. So I've got 32 outputs on this Dante card. Where are those outputs coming from? They're coming from out 1 to 16, and then this has another set of outs called Ultranet. So, and that's 1 to 16 on the Ultranet. And then you can choose what those outs are. So if I look out my out 1 to 16, if you remember that's going to outs 1 to 16 on Dante, I can then say, right, output 1, I want to be this bus. Output 2, I want to be this bus. Output 3, I want to be this bus, for example, all here. And then I will choose what I want to go on here, and then here's my alternate outs, and I'll choose what I want to go on here. So the reason I've split them, you'll notice my comms are on the alternate, and my things like talkback and callers and all this sort of stuff, and my main left and right TX are all on these outputs where it says out 116. The reason being out 116 is the only outputs that you can put delays on. So if you do think that you're going to have to delay that output separately somehow for somebody, then that's where you want to put it. Whereas alternate, you have no delay options. So anything on here is going straight out, no delays, and that works perfectly for my comms system. So we don't want to delay anything going. There's no need to. So there we go. We can send those out without any delay there. Ooh, let's go back to here. Inputs, my channels 1 to 32, because you've got 32 channels effectively on the X32 range, is coming straight from my card. That's all that's saying. So my X32 channels inputs all coming from my card, and all my card outputs are coming from out 1 to 16 and alternate 1 to 16, and then you can choose what goes to those outs and alternate. So hopefully it's quite a quick overview, but it gives you an idea of just how I've set up my X32 here when I'm running a typical 2 Vmix setup. If you have any questions, please do ask. Put them down in the comments. I will do my best to answer them. If you want me to go into any more technical detail on certain aspects of the X32, then please ask and I will do my best to facilitate that for you. In the meantime, please subscribe. Please tick that little bell. I'm going to be putting out some more videos over the next few days, so you will be notified of those. Again, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.